7 searches, that stuff.
That's right,
Yeah.
man.
Oh, Rob, I had a conversation with Robert Herman about that, and he said you do realise, by the way, that those 7 searches, they weren't all for several hours.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It's Robert. But some of them were for several hours in that tiny bedroom. I mean, that bedroom is so small, isn't it?
Extremely
Yeah, like we
small.
talked about, I'm sure some of the video of me and my partner giving the talk on the TV stations after a day of evidence and stuff, and the key was a big one. Everybody thought that was, I mean, at the time it was bizarre. Where did that makes no sense? It just happened to fall randomly. No one noticed it the last time they were in there. So yeah, that was just one of the things. But I mean, they went over all that in the show, and the dude talks about this and many other things. So yeah, I to be honest with you, the new thing, this this motion to stay the appeal.
Yeah.
Okay, if this turns out to be legit, all right, this would clearly be a Brady violation. So I think they're going to have to do something about this. But there's so many questions. So many, you know what I'm talking about, right? The affidavit.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But there's so many questions. I mean, with all of the news and everything that happened, and then the documentaries, and why did it take so long for this to come forward? There's going to be a lot of questions.
Yeah. Well, was some of that answered by Kathleen Zellner's response? Because she seemed to have really sold Lisa Comfort and co. a bit of a dummy there, because they were coming at her saying, "Oh, you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall," and she's back at them with, "Well, no, we've been investigating this since December."
Well, when someone's willing to sign an affidavit under oath, I mean, they're putting themselves on the line for perjury. So
Yes.
this isn't some sort of joke. But no. I don't know what her response was on what was this individual's explanation. Even if he called back and the officer said we got who we needed, then all of a sudden did the witness just sort of turn off his TV for 10 years? I don't know. I don't know what the explanation was on that.
Well, apparently he just as soon as Making a Murderer came out, he'd emailed Jerry, but Jerry had changed internet users, and so he never got the email. And eventually, Kathleen Zellner tried phoning him, and it was just like it took ages to get them together. Can we just backtrack a minute, because it's something that's always interested me? Perjury. How severe is Wisconsin on perjury?
I don't know how to say how severe it is in Wisconsin. We can do a court tracker, and you can look at how many cases have had convictions. You can look at every different judge, and what the sentence was, who the lawyers were involved in the case. I've never done a court tracker on perjury. However, it's kind of like extortion. Okay, they charge it around here, but they pick and choose when to do it. And perjury is, I think it's got to be real solid for the DAs to charge it around here. So in Outagamie County, they've charged it, but it's something like the most well-known case was where in a divorce, the husband had won the lottery, and on his financial disclosure, he didn't list it. And I don't know if it was, $2 million or something, but it was significant. And then after he got divorced, everybody found out he had won the lottery. And of course, he gets back and gets charged for perjury because he filed a financial disclosure and testified under oath without disclosing that. So, I mean, they'll take it seriously. I think in in a case like this, if it turned out that if they do a bunch of litigation and they have an evidentiary hearing and turns out that this guy signed this affidavit, and had any false statements in there, I wouldn't be surprised to see him get charged.
Well, if it was him, if I can add something, to me from afar, I'm Canadian. And so from afar, it doesn't look like the Wisconsin court system would charge anyone of the state with perjury. This guy, they might, because he's kind of gone against them. That's the feel I got. It's like, if you go against us, we will use every tooth and nail that we have to get you. If you're with us and you do something wrong, we'll take care of you. And that's the way it looks, right from the 85 case, nothing found wrong in the first wrongful conviction of Stephen Avery. Everyone's sort of scot-free. And I don't think it's going to get to that spot. I think you're going to have an evidentiary hearing, and this case is going to be blown apart again.
I don't know what it's like in Canada or even really so much in other states, other than when I read or the federal cases we got to look at that are out of our jurisdiction. But I would tend to agree.
Yeah.
So I always felt that if a defense lawyer went a little too far, and being a zealous advocate, a defense lawyer in Wisconsin was putting their career on the line, because defense lawyers get charged in Wisconsin with party to the crime of helping. If I have a client who is under a restraining order and they have to somehow pick up the kid or something like that, and I somehow facilitate my client to get this child or whatever, and suddenly he's in close proximity to the person who's got the restraining order. I mean, defense lawyers have then been arrested and charged with party to the crime of violating a restraining order. And whereas, and I know many prosecutors, some of them aren't prosecutors anymore, but I know a prosecutor personally who got charged, or he committed a Brady violation. He intentionally withheld evidence, got caught, and got a slap on the wrist, and that was it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, in Making a Murder, the first season, it was this. It was always a statement by Tom Fallon that intrigued me. I wanted to get an insight of what someone in the legal profession would think about it. Is when he's in court and he says, if the defense is going to go ahead and pursue this framing defense, they do so at their peril. And the way he says it, I always want to know what exactly, and it sort of alludes to what you just said. It's like there's this hidden sort of, unwritten law. You do so at your peril. You're going against us, and so, it's unfortunate.
I forget who the author was. The author he was a federal prosecutor out of Chicago. He started the whole trend of arresting and charging defense lawyers as a way to get to the defendants. And I don't remember, I can't think of his name. It's like Baldacci or something like that. So he became a writer like Scott Turow. And so here in the States, all these legal mysteries and stuff like that. But I can't remember if it was Baldacci, but he started this whole thing, and then it started moving up here. So then in the 90s, all of a sudden, I got, my partner and I back in the 90s got called. We were representing guys from Chicago on an armed robbery case up here. And the next thing you know, they're executing search warrants on law offices. They're arresting, threatening to arrest. When I represented a detective out of Neenah, the DA, I was in his office when I found out he was investigating me, and they were trying to get a guy to make a statement against me, and I pretty much lost my shit and told that DA, I was like, this is going to come back to haunt you, and it did. But that's what they try to do. There was a whole trend started, not so much anymore, but if you can't get to the defendant, go after their defense counsel, and everything will unravel and fall apart and stuff. That was a real thing. It's a little different now.
More people looking.
More people looking, and I don't want to just disparage people. I see. I'm not doing criminal work anymore, so I can just tell you what I hear. The prosecutors are younger. There's not a lot of career prosecutors anymore. Um, they've taken away a lot of the financial benefits to being a prosecutor. So you got a lot of people that are out of school, and it's more like a stepping stone again. And these people aren't. They're not. They're not working real hard, and they're not willing to ruin people's careers just to try to get a political leg up because they're looking to get out into the private world anyways. They're not looking necessarily to make a name for themselves in the prosecutor's office as much anymore. So things have changed. I know that.
Can I just quickly changing the subject, and I'm sorry, Tracy, I've just jumped in there. Somebody was asking about the next live. I've put the link there to Ripper Jack. It's the Ripper. Let me get the right channel. It's Ripper Jack Gaming. Okay, so the next one is on Ripper Jack's channel. And just quickly, I messaged you during the week to inquire about this. Obviously, this Derek Chauvin being found guilty, and would that have any retrospective action in the case of the Eagle Nation Cycles shooting?
I don't see it. I actually need to talk to Howard Schoenfeld from DeWitt because if they could find something to go back, it's going to have to be a retroactive change in the qualified immunity law. So I went back. I don't even know where to start on the Michael Funk tragedy. I mean, so Cole White here's a quick summary, and I don't know if you guys followed any of it, but Cole White is a lawyer who represents Eagle Nation and a bunch of individuals for a violation of their constitutional rights. He's horrible. I think I can say that without worrying about defamation because he lost his license, was chastised over and over by every court he was in front of. But he took their money, didn't do anything. The Nina attorneys scheduled depositions. No one showed up to the depositions because their attorney didn't even tell them they had depositions. So then the Nina attorneys moved to dismiss all of the lawsuits on the grounds for failure to prosecute. The plaintiffs didn't even know that was going on. Okay. And then after they filed this motion to dismiss, Cole White in his office apparently falsify affidavits to try to save the case. The judge goes off, chastises them, dismisses everything. So then the Michael Funk thing comes up, and I set up the estate for his widow, and DeWitt puts a whole team on the case to do the wrongful death and the civil rights. And then I filed a Rule 59 motion, basically for reconsideration with Judge Griesbach in Green Bay, saying all of these people have now lost all of their claims because they were defrauded by this attorney who failed to do anything. I mean, the competence wasn't even an issue. The guy did nothing. And we said that that's not right. They should have their day in court. Then, of course, the judge said, no, too bad, so sad. If you pick the wrong attorney, then your remedy is to sue your attorney. So they're completely blocked out. Then, of course, how the Michael Funk thing is not a violation of someone's rights when you have an individual who's laying on the ground unarmed and an officer is bragging about putting a bullet right between his eyes, okay? And so I pulled up the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, and basically what they said, I forgot some of this. They looked at the two standards to examine qualified immunity and whether the police violated a statutory or constitutional right. That's number one. And number two, whether the right was clearly established at the time of the challenged conduct. The Court of Appeals didn't even look at number one. They only looked at number two, and they said that there was no right that had been clearly established that was violated when Michael Funk got shot in the head. And honestly, there's so much just legal rigmarole and contortion to get there because of there's cases saying you have an armed suspect sitting there with a gun in his lap, okay, but he's not making any threatening moves. The officers can't just go ahead and use deadly force. There are decisions pre-Funk saying that. They said that based on the circumstances, they were so unique with the officers getting shot at by Fladoff and Hoffer getting hit in the head. They said there's been no other precedent or previous case with those crazy facts. Therefore, there was no clearly established constitutional right. There you go. So here's the answer to your question. What happened to Derek Chauvin, if it is the impetus to change the qualified immunity laws, have one standard so every circuit doesn't have all these different standards, and maybe just not make it qualified immunity is almost complete immunity. If they're going to do something so that police officers who have a tough job, trust me, I get it, right? Very difficult job. They deserve a lot of credit. But they also can't have a free reign to just go out and shoot people with no fear of any sort of consequences. So they're going to have to change the law, and they would almost have to make it retroactive, which now you're going to get into constitutional law where I can't tell you, when things are going to be retroactive and when they're not, but I doubt that the Funk case can be saved.
Yeah. So just before Tracy has a shot, Tracy runs a website in support of Brendan Dassey. Now, Rob, we see you obviously with Anjanette Levy covering Stephen Avery's case, but did you get a chance to look at the time at Brendan's case as well?
Yeah, I can't remember a lot about that. I think Ray Edelstein was on that, and Mark Fremgen were on there, so I knew them very well back at the time in the day. And the way they tried that case, back at the time, I remember questioning how that was all tried. But there's no question, and to this day, that's one thing. And I know I told you this before, Paul, and I've certainly been on record many times. I mean, how Brendan is still in prison is just beyond me. I mean, he is, but it's not right. It's not right. And back then, I think a lot of people thought it was not right. But back then, remember, everybody was freaking out and their hair was on fire because when the whole issue with Brendan talking to investigators and not having his attorney, and I mean, people were like, "What is going on?" I mean, that's absurd.
Yeah, there was no oversight.
You wouldn't do that in a
either.
misdemeanor. Sorry, Tracy.
Sorry to jump in there, but there was no oversight. So I've spoken to people from the Public Defender's Office who were around at that time, and people were acutely aware of the conduct of Kaczynski, but nobody stepped in. And, you touched on Fremgen and Edelstein, and the strategy going into defending, more or less a child in a false confession case without bringing in a false confession expert, I think is quite ineffective. How do you educate a jury on something that's, innately counterintuitive without a false confession expert? So
I agree 1,000%. Yeah.
Yeah. When you were covering the trials, what was the public temperature at the time? What was the sentiment among, the public of Manitowoc at that time?
I feel as though, I think back in the day, it seemed split to me as well. I felt like, well, obviously I knew Ken Kratz, and I knew him personally, and he trusted us to represent him when he got in trouble. But I feel like Ken was always fighting this battle. Like, he'd call me and say, "There's overwhelming evidence." It's like yeah, this thing is a little strange. This is a little strange. But if you have 900 pieces of evidence and 9 of them are questionable, okay, look at the 891 that aren't questionable.
Yeah.
So Ken was fighting this battle. I feel like he I think he wanted the notoriety, he wanted the fame.
Sure.
That's why he was having press conferences and just
Yeah.
laying out all this evidence, which really I think is a questionable tactic, whether it's ethical or not. But whatever, they do it, and when prosecutors do it, no one seems to care. So he's doing all that, I think, because he got fame, but also I felt like he was trying to convince everybody that the the first conviction may have been a mistake, but this one is absolutely not a
Yeah.
mistake. So I feel like it was 50-50. A lot of people had a lot of questions back then too.
Mm.
It wasn't like we were doing news stories and everybody's calling in and stuff and saying,
Yeah.
"Oh, he's guilty, he's guilty." No, there were a lot of people questioning a lot that was happening.
Yeah. And do you think that the role of the presses, so we know that, the defense, Jerry and Dean, stepped up to the mark because they had no other choice, more or less, because you've got Ken Kratz coming out each day. Do you think that the sentiment swayed depending on who was giving the presser of the day, or what type of evidence that Kratz was talking about? Do you think that he shaped the narrative so well that the public were taken in by it through those pressers as the trial went on?
I think you have to remember though that the Hallbachs were out there, so it wasn't just Ken. So there was a ton of press. Okay. And I'm not so sure if it was always Ken, but it might have been like Tim. I think Tim he's a lawyer in Calumet County now, and I actually have a case with him. It's a civil issue, but they were out there and they were making statements. I'm pretty sure they hired the Menn law firm to sue Avery civilly.
Yes.
While the criminal prosecution was going on, because they wanted to attach his money from the state for the wrongful conviction. So they were trying to get that money, like a prejudgment attachment. And so that was going on. So you have people who are victims, and a lot of people can sympathize with them, and they're coming out saying, this guy murdered our daughter, our sister, and we don't want him to have this money. We want it for damages later or whatever. So I think that all combined definitely I'm sure it influenced some people.
Yeah. We've touched on this we spoke recently with John Farrick about this as well, and Dr. Ed Johnston last night, or maybe it's during the day there. I don't know what time zone we're in, but the Mike Halbach's role really was an emotional ploy, and I'm not speaking out of turn about their loss or anything like that, but I think in terms of due process and the presumption of innocence and all those rights afforded to Stephen and Brendan, they were just obliterated by the role of not only the prosecution, but, those type of press conferences where you have Mike Halbach talking about, you just have to look at the tape. And then he's asked, have you seen the tape? No, I've not seen the tape. It's like.
Yeah, I feel like that's I feel like that's what a lot of people do nowadays, though. Everybody's an expert on everything, and they haven't even some of these election lawsuits and people emailing me and calling me, and they're telling me things, and I'm like, I don't know where you're hearing this, but the actual lawsuit is online. Read it. Don't listen to what someone on Facebook is telling you. Go pull it up and actually read it, and then tell me what you think.
Yeah.
So,
did your opinion on the trials and the outcomes change from the time of covering it as a legal analyst? Was it CBS 5?
CBS,
yeah. Did it change once you saw Making a Murderer, or did you always maintain the same type of thoughts?
I feel as though Making a Murderer just brought back a lot. Seeing things behind the scenes was different, but I feel it brought back a lot of the stuff that we were talking about back then that was bizarre and didn't make sense. I mean, there were just so many things, right?
Mm.
I mean, but nothing. I feel that when Brendan's confession first came out way back in 2006 or whatever it was, across the board, people in my office and people in the legal community were like, okay, that's got to be suppressed. That's just absurd. He wants to go back to class and he doesn't want to miss WWF. I mean, he has no idea what he's saying. And it was the absolute, like, it was almost like a paradigm confession to teach cops how not to take a confession. It was absurd. So I would say after all these years, nothing's changed with respect to Brendan. I don't think anything with his prosecution made sense. I don't think his confession made sense. I think he was thrown to the wolves. I think everything that happened to him, I still believe that was wrong. With Avery, I mean, there's still a lot of questions, but I do think there's a lot of evidence that was presented to certainly allow someone to say he was guilty. But beyond a reasonable doubt, you always wonder, that means different things to different people.
Yeah. I think that's one of the questions I had for you, was that, watching the case unfold, watching the trial unfold, I should say, was there an argument or a piece of evidence that struck you as being totally unreasonable, totally without credibility?
Okay, this is a real simple. There was a lot of things. Okay, there is no way that anybody could believe that what Brendan said happened in that bedroom happened in there. I'm sorry. Okay, I could be wrong, but if I had to bet my life savings on it, I'm betting that what Brendan said happened in that bedroom did not happen. There's just, I don't know if anybody, I don't even think the police, I don't think Ken Kratz believed that what Brendan said happened in there happened. I mean, there's no possible way they could have cleaned that. There's no possible way that there wouldn't have been trace evidence. That's just not the key. Okay, of course, the first thing everybody thought was, that's planted, right? So that seemed a little bit ridiculous too. But what Brendan said happened in that bedroom, I just, no.
Yeah.
Has anybody come forward and said, yeah, I think it could have happened because they were these amazing cleaners and they were able to get rid of all trace evidence? And I don't know if I've ever heard anybody actually stick up for that part of the story.
Not from a legal sense, but you do find people in the community that hang on to that. But I think, what's really strikes me about that is that, Jerry and Dean were able to strike out that charge, the sexual assault charge for Stephen. And then, Jerry in cross with Sherry Culhane, gets her to clearly state that she had Brendan Dassey's DNA. She's tested Brendan Dassey's DNA. And I think the words are, there's not one shred of Brendan Dassey's DNA on anything that they tested. And I think it was over 500 items. Yet Brendan is, he's convicted on the sexual assault charge. And if we fast forward to now and we look at the clemency criteria that, Governor Evers has in place, even though we know it shouldn't absolutely apply to Brendan Dassey because this is a young guy who is innocent, one of those criteria that he was denied on is the sexual assault charge, and that he's a registered sex offender, which just blows my mind, because, like, as you said, clearly in that bedroom, it wasn't possible. You only have to look at the bed heads and the knobs on the bed. They're shining. There's no way that there was somebody writhing around trying to remove themselves from those bed knobs. It's ridiculous.
I agree. But like I said, even back then, and fast forward today, I'm trying to think if anybody ever, because Brendan was basically convicted on his confession, right? So there was a lot of talk about how ridiculous all that was. I've never heard anybody, even Ken, come forward and say that he really thought that all of that happened in that bedroom. Like,
can I get a word in here?
Sorry.
Sorry. So it's Rob, you're in the profession, like legal still, right? You're a practicing lawyer.
Yes.
Yeah, and so from these questions, the sense, and from what I've seen, is this sense of justice. To quote Bob Dylan, "Justice is a game," And so when you talk about like the Michael Funk case, how these procedural things happen, so the real goal wasn't to let those people try their case. They kind of picked the wrong lawyer. And when we go into situations like this, like no one really believes Brendan's. So as a professional in that arena, how does one reconcile these sort of, they don't have to be glaring, but they're obvious sort of shortcomings, and not to put you in the on the spot, but as a group, how do lawyers who see those failings, is there any, are you able to go, we should start taking a stand and trying to address these? Is there anything like that happening within your own profession?
I think we are all doing that. I mainly do, back in the day on the criminal defense board, that's what we did. I mean, we were fighting against all this garbage, and but I would be totally naive to think that people every single day aren't getting screwed because they got an idiot lawyer. They got a lawyer who is way over their head. They have maybe for political reasons they got charged when they normally you would never get charged. I mean, if you want to talk about how, geez, I don't even know how much I want to talk about it, but you get out of law school. Well, you get out of law school, and most people are pretty idealistic. A lot of the people I went to school with, a lot of people want to help people. You want to make money too. You want to be able to pay your mortgage. But when you get into the real world, there's just no question about it. I mean, I could literally tell stories forever, but it could be as simple as there's a big drug ring that gets busted, right? So there's 6 co-defendants. Okay, the public defender's office in the county can only represent one of those, right? Because otherwise they're going to have a conflict. So the other 5 have to get farmed out. Okay, so I've always been a big advocate of getting local lawyers, the best local lawyers you can in that area, because they're going to know the judges, they're going to know the prosecutors, they're going to know the cops. Okay, well, this kind of stuff would happen all the time. So you have 6 co-defendants, and myself and 2 other local defense counsel all substitute on the judge that we have, because we know that if this case stays in, let's say it's a cocaine case, moving cocaine. So we know this judge is going to put him in prison, period, end of story. There's no local attorney that would leave that case in front of that judge, unless you want your client to go to prison, okay? Well, then you shouldn't be in the profession. But the ones who would go drop money, a lot more money, on a big name out-of-town lawyer, they would keep the case in front of that judge. And we'd be thinking, what the hell are they thinking? Do they know something we don't know? And sure enough, what happens? I get the judge I want. My client gets probation, not 1 day in jail. The people that stay to the other judge are in prison. Is that fair? So is that fair? But that's the kind of stuff that happens all the time.
Yeah. I just see the from the Michael Funk and the Stephen Avery case, and there just seems, and because the criminal justice, there's a sort of blanket phrase, the criminal justice system of America is broken and we need to fix it. It seems so fragmented and individualized per state. And to me, it just that, in particular with this case, it's hard to believe that anything like justice or truth or integrity exists in that particular, especially in that with this case. And so just what I was getting at is, I know people, if you liken it to a building or something, and you're living in an apartment on the third floor, but there's this awful stench in the basement, how often do you, or how long do you just not pay attention to that? You know,
but wait a second. Okay, so now Jerry Buting and Dean Strang, long time. They had a lot more experience than me back then. They were two of the top criminal defense lawyers. I mean, those guys are good lawyers.
Yeah.
So Stephen had good lawyers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Michael Funk, that case, I brought that case down to I helped them to bring in DeWitt. Okay, so the lawyers from DeWitt, one of the guys is like repeatedly every year ranked in the top 10 trial lawyers in our state. So those are really good lawyers. What happened though in Funk is different. That's a federal judiciary that is anti-plaintiff, super conservative, and clear your docket. Okay, we're not going to let these people be sued. We're not going to let these officers be sued. So too bad, so sad, qualified immunity. So that has more to do with the judiciary. Those lawyers, if you got the judges and they're stacked against you, but that's another reason though why every time I had a jury trial, I did tell the jury a lot of time in voir dire, I'd say that, you're participating in a system that, in my opinion, it's a flawed system, but it's still the best system we got. If I practice in a system where I had to rely on one judge, one person to sit up there and decide whether or not, especially if you're a political person, you got to run for office. Okay. I got to rely on this guy, this one individual or this woman to decide whether or not my client's guilty. No, I want to take 12 people from the community and you tell us what this community wants. Does this community want this person to be convicted or not? So I think the jury system's the best system in the world. I mean, it's, flawed, but I don't think that if you can come up with a system that doesn't stink on some level, let me know. But people, if it's going to be run by people, I think it's going to stink at some point.
Yeah, true enough.
Actually, Rob, the main reason I got you on was for your main job, not as a defense attorney, but as lead guitarist with your band Mistrial.
Yeah. Well, I've seen some of your videos, Paul. Paul, you can play. Maybe we need to add that to our band. Have you come over here?
Absolutely. Do you think that Ken Kratz could join us on bass?
Well, Ken played guitar, and he used to always ask me to come and play. I never did, but I don't know. I don't even know I haven't talked to Ken now for so long. I don't know. But yeah, our bassist is a judge. He just got elected to the Court of Appeals, in our district up here. So, and he's good. So it's fun. It's fun.
I can only hope that it's on a different level to Alibi.
Wait, who's Alibi? Is that
that was Schimmel and Kratz.
Schimmel
and Schimmel.
Oh wait, that's the name. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Those guys actually play together?
They did.
Yeah.
Oh,
wasn't there another one? It was Schimmel, Kratz, and another person in the legal profession.
I think a lot of them were involved in the legal profession, weren't they?
Yeah.
I just wouldn't have been cut out to be a prosecutor. Too big of a soft heart. It'd be tough. I'd be bad as a judge too. But a lot of judges I know, it's very difficult because a lot of times you're going to be sentencing someone who may be on a mandatory minimum, and you got to send them to prison, but you get a pre-sentence report and you find out that this person was abandoned by their family when they're 6 years old and jumped from foster home to foster home, never really had any roots, never had anybody to mentor them, maybe were abused, and then all of a sudden they get into drugs, and now you got to sentence them, and it's hard to do that. There's a lot of good judges that care about that, and they don't just they don't just look at somebody like, well, you committed a crime, now you're going to prison. They see the person, and it's a tough job, actually.
I think Jerry Buting earlier today, or one of the guests on the channels, was mentioning the for-profit prison system, and how much that contributes to this the incarceration epidemic that the United States has. I think it's the most. I don't know the stats, but I think it's the most high. They're the highest percentage of people are incarcerated in the States, up to 20% or something, and so. It's all.
I think the for-profit prison system is ridiculous.
So bizarre, hey?
Yeah. I mean, you had in the 90s, I think it was when Scott Walker was running on the tough on crime thing and was the darling of the Republican Party in Wisconsin. He actually ended up sending, I hate to use the word prisoners, people who are incarcerated to other states into other private prisons. And there were kickbacks and a lot of money under the table, And I think even Schimmel at some stage, people who were out had been released. He introduced like an ankle monitoring initiative that they had to pay to wear. And that's only in the last few years that came up.
Okay, so there's a good example though. So the bracelet, the ankle monitoring started coming in. There really wasn't any of that when I first started practicing, and then it slowly started coming in. And then when it became a nice moneymaker for the jail, judges used to say, like, I'm not throwing judges under the bus. That's a tough job too. Everybody's got a tough job. But it used to be you failed when you got a fine, you failed when you're on probation, you failed again. So now you need to spend some time in jail. But now all those people that they used to tell us need to go to jail, none of them are going to jail. They're just getting on the ankle bracelet on the monitoring because they have to pay like $300 a week or something to be on it. And I mean, it's money.
The profit margin's much greater for the state on stuff like that,
Well, they're out there on their own, So I do think there's a lot of people who are fighting against that. Scott Walker did one thing that I now that I'm on the board of the Wisconsin Association for Justice, I'm doing a lot more plaintiffs PI work. But so my kids call me ambulance chaser or whatever. But like in 2010, we had a truth in auto law here in Wisconsin, so that if you buy insurance, if you get underinsured motorist insurance, okay, you can use that underinsured motorist insurance if you are injured by another motorist who's underinsured, okay? Right. Well, they changed the law, so now every dollar of your underinsured motorist coverage or your UIM gets reduced by every dollar you get from all these other sources. So it's kind of illusory coverage, and people think they have coverage and they have extra money to pay their bills, and they don't. And that's just one of the things that they did. So we had a Truth in Auto Act so that victims of injuries in our state could be compensated and have insurance coverage. And in 2010, they changed it, and they basically voided all those laws. So that's the kind of stuff that I still fight against because it just makes me sick. It's wrong.
Yeah. Have you heard of the governor, the initiatives that he wants to bring in regards to criminal justice reform as part of the Badger Bounce Back?
And I'm not super familiar with a lot of that justice reform. I think there's a lot of talk about rehabilitation and that sort of thing as opposed to incarceration, right? Which is that's been going on for decades, and so I'd like to see more of that. What I saw, I didn't stay up on this, but now they passed Marcy's Law here in Wisconsin, and I only know what my partners and other criminal defense lawyers are telling me is that gave victims more rights. Again, I'm not an expert on it. I didn't even read it. Okay, this is what my partners are telling me, but victims can actually kill deals. So if a prosecutor cuts a deal with a defense counsel, They go to the victim says no. I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. You know how many like domestic cases are charged where there's a custody battle going on, and it's all about people are making claims, calling the police on each other because they want to get an advantage in a divorce or a custody case or something else, or a business situation. And now those people are going to be able to force a trial when the prosecutor who actually is in charge of the case and knows all the facts of the case decides that rather than trying the case, we should cut this deal. But now a victim who may have just an axe to grind can kill that deal. So again, I'm talking out of school in the sense that I don't really know the ins and outs of that law, but that sounded ridiculous to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the initiatives, I took part in the Zoom call, and I'm sure that they were like, who the hell is this Australian woman? Because I had to have my say. But one of the initiatives that he's putting forward is, making sure that 17-year-olds are tried in juvenile court. And I would hope to see that type of reform come to pass. And he didn't talk about sentencing reform, which I'd love to see in Wisconsin as well. But the 17, the juveniles, he has a big focus on juvenile justice. And I think it's at the moment there's about 120 juvenile lifers in Wisconsin. And just touching before when you talked about, a lot of people that are presented in front of judges suffer from trauma, and they've had various traumatic experiences in their childhood. Well, I think it's up to about 80% of these juvenile lifers are those types of individuals who have suffered those types of traumas and childhoods. So it would be great to see something with the 17-year-olds applied retroactively, I think.
I was practicing when they changed it from 18 to 17, and then of course they changed it so that it wasn't when the crime was committed, it was when it was charged. So if someone is 15, but they investigate it for a year and a half, and then they charge them as an adult, and you're saying, wait a second, he was 15 when this happened. Too bad, so sad, right? We all thought that was absurd. And of course, everybody who doesn't even know anything about the legal system would say, you're charging a 17-year-old as an adult, but this person can't even drink a beer for 4 more years. It makes no sense. But there's a lot of that in the law that doesn't make any sense. But I would be totally for those reformations. It's kind of like what happened with the federal act when they brought in all the minimum sentencing guidelines. The people wanted to clean up, get the drug dealers out of the communities and all that kind of stuff, and all you ended up doing was sending young kids to prison for selling a bag of weed. Unintended consequences, I think. I'd like to see more of that that reform. Absolutely.
We're rapidly running out of time, and we don't want to encroach on the next slot, but we had a question in the chat from Henry, I believe it was, that was asking, Rob, your opinion on Kathleen Zellner filing to remand the case for a 3rd time.
So I think they're talking about this motion.
Yes.
I do. Okay. I don't know what's going to happen with this. Obviously, she filed this motion to stay the appeal to supplement the record and possibly have an evidentiary hearing. But this is a colorable case. This to me is it's not a joke, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got potential perjury. This isn't like, I'm more used to the civil side of things now, where you can take depositions and you can dig into things with written discovery, which of course you don't have in the criminal context. But so I think this witness needs to be get on under oath and testify and figure out some of these is this all from memory? Did you make any contemporaneous notes, all that kind of stuff? Just kind of get into that. And like you said, Attorney Zellner said that, there was some explanation as to why there were these delays and all that kind of stuff. I think you dig into that and you really get into the meat on that. But to me, here's what I would say: if you're on the court of appeals, what's the harm in staying the appeal and sending it back to supplement the record? I mean, why not? Now, I don't know what the standard is, to tell you the truth. I've got the motion. I don't know if there was any briefing. If there was any briefing, I didn't see that yet. But my thought on it is this is a legitimate evidentiary issue, and I think it would be a mistake to blow it off, because that is just going to add to the fuel to the fire of, why has this case been such a mess. So I think I would want to err on the side of having all of the evidence in. But then again, I was involved in plenty of cases where we tried to reopen judgments and that kind of stuff and said these are new facts, and the court said no, they're not new facts, even though they were, and that was that. So who knows?
Yeah, it's just that the state's response was so rapid. It was within a couple of days, and then Zellner did her response to the state's response, and we've got Jerry Buting tweeting about the fact that she completely backgammoned them. But they were on about throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what would stick, and then she fired back with this. Well, unlike you lot, I do a proper investigation.
Okay, so that brings up an interesting point, though, right? So if you watch the documentaries, and especially the second season, look at the amount of time, money, and effort that was being put into that investigation. Now, in Outagamie County, there's probably, 6,000 crimes charged every year. Could you imagine, not everyone is this big, but could you imagine putting in that kind of investigation and time and effort and money and up to even a fraction of those cases? It is very difficult. I mean, now I'm not saying that. I think no matter where you get, at some point, things are missed in every case on both sides. I really do. I think that if you give me a case back in the day, whether I won at that trial or lost at that trial, I've probably felt going into the case that I investigated it. I had my private investigator did everything they could do. We got all the evidence. We filed all the motions that we needed to. If it was a media case, we got all kinds of stuff to the media. But if someone went back and had a couple of years to dig through everything we did, I'm sure they'd find all kinds of stuff that I missed. I just think it happens.
Rob, Tracy, obviously, thank you very much, Tracy, for joining me 3 times. I got 3 times the pleasure of your company. Rob, it's always fantastic chatting with you. Hopefully we'll get you back on again soon. I wouldn't be at all surprised if 1 or 2 other people get in touch wanting you to join them. So, all I can say is just thanks very much for doing this, particularly as it's for the dude who sadly, as you know, passed away August of last year. I mean, he thoroughly enjoyed having you on that very first chat. I
thought it was good.
Look,
you guys are easy to talk to and fun, and he was fun. But I'm in my 50s, so when someone that much younger than me has a heart attack, it's a little scary. I can't help but start to think about my own mortality a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it was nice talking to you guys.
Likewise.
I feel like I'm watching all these shows on Netflix and Prime and Stars, and they're all from New Zealand and Tasmania and Australia, and it seems like what's that one? The Gloaming or something like that. That's another one.
That's quite good. I think that's in Tassie. I think it's Tassie. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So bottom line is, you guys got some good programs coming from down there. So
Yeah.
congratulations.
Yeah, and we're obsessed with American shows, you know. So, but yeah, no, we're not doing too bad down here through the pandemic. I have to say, we're doing okay.
That's
Thank
good.
God. Yeah.
Can I just finish off though by saying that I've had another message from Mark Wiegert regarding Captain Crunch, and he wrote, "Thank you for your inquiry. As you are aware, both here in Calumet and in Manitowoc, we have some crackerjack detectives who can literally supply evidence out of thin air. Along with our colleagues at the Wisconsin Department of Injustice, we can provide proof that Captain Crunch is whatever nationality you wish him to be, along with a signed confession that he is indeed from the country of your choosing. We will then provide you with an affidavit to say that we are 100% certain of his place of origin and will stand behind everything done in the case. We have enjoyed a great success rate over the years, and if you are still unsure and you have a chance to, you may want to read former prosecutor Kratz's book. Sincerely, Lieutenant Wiegert."
I think it's time for some finality, Paul, with Captain Crunch.
I think so. I think
so. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Oh dear. No, yes, I think the yes, the Captain Crunch thing is it's great fun, but without the dude to argue with, it's difficult. You know, I'm trying to get somebody to.
Yeah, wasn't he your main nemesis on that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Listen, I'm going to say cheerio because we are encroaching on Ripperjack Gaming.
Yeah.
Rob, many thanks for coming on, and Tracy, many thanks as well.
Thank you very much. Lovely
nice talking
to chat.
to you, Tracy.
Yeah, you too, Rob. Take care.
Take care, both of you. All right.
Will do.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.
Cheers, Rob.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye
Bye.
for now. Bye bye. Bye bye.